discussion on the foundational texts of Indian philosophy. This meeting will be recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. If you have missed any of the previous discussions, you may find it on YouTube. Also, there will be a question and answer segment at the end of the discussion session. If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask. Please use the raise hand feature of Zoom in order to maintain the queue. If you are not speaking, please mute yourselves in order to minimize the disturbances. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Thank you and welcome everyone. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namah. So we are continuing our discussion on the Purusha Suktam from the Rig Veda. There's a special reason why I mentioned Rig Veda, because Purusha Suktam is found in all the four Vedas with slight variations, except that in Samaveda it is found only in a fragment, and Yajurveda it is quite long, and also Rig Veda, but the most authentic version is found in the Rig Veda. There are slight variations, and as we proceed, I shall try to point out some of the various versions in the four Vedas. Now, in the comment section, there was a request from some writers. That is, in my previous classes, I tried to give a definition of Purusha. So, what is Purusha? So, one definition that was given was this Puri Shete iti Purusha. Purusha is that divine spark, the divine reality, the immanent indweller, the inner divine spirit that is present in everything and everywhere. The immanent aspect of the divine, the all-pervading reality which has got an immanent dimension. It's called Antaryami, means that which resides within all beings and which regulates and controls everything. So the definition that I gave was Purishete iti Purusha. Purusha is that divine spark which resides within our body, and for that very reason it means it is distinct from the body, different from the body, Sharirindriya Vidriktam. Atma in the Upanishad and the Shankaracharya's commentary. So they thought that, some of them thought that his definition is part of Purusha Suktam. No, it is only definition taken from other works where the word Purusha is defined in so many different ways. For example, Purusha Puri Shadaka. This is Yaskas Niruktam, it's called, which means that Purusha, the Jivatma, which resides with the human body, within the human body, which is endowed with 9 openings. The 2 eyes, the 2 nostrils, the 2 ears, the mouth, and the 2 openings. And then Purishete iti Purusha, that's the one which I quoted. It is found in Shankaracharya's commentary. But it closely follows Yaska's tradition, because Shankaracharya very often quotes Yaska's own definition. There is one definition that is exclusively from Shankaracharya, that is Pura Purvameva iti Purusha. This one, Asit Pura Purvameva iti Purusha. That supreme person, the cosmic person, the divine reality which was there at the very beginning, which is the fundamental cause of everything that exists. These are some of the definitions. Puridekhe Sidadi Tishtadidi Purushaka. Practically they all mean the same thing. Pum Shariram Buddhirva Tatra Aso Vishyobalambhanartham Sidati Idi Purushaka. It's a very famous definition from one of the commentators, Durgacharya, who wrote a well-known commentary in 2 volumes. You can get that. I don't know if they are available in English. Durgacharya was a great commentator who wrote a commentary on Yaska's Nirukta, which is the first effort to define the words found in the Rigveda Samhita. Mostly he took mantras from Rigveda Samhita, not just a few, hundreds, and he wrote a commentary on it. So, for example, his method is, suppose he wants to give a definition of who is Indra, the deity, the Vedic god. Indra Kasmat. Why is called Indra like that? Vaishwanara Kasmat. Like that. Why and how that particular word got that implication. Like that he goes on giving definitions, descriptive definitions. That's what is called descriptive definitions. So please remember, when you listen to this class, what I'm trying to do is to give an interpretation in modern English of the Purusha Suktam, especially the version found in the Rigveda Samhita, 10th Mandala, 90th Sukta, because it is found in other Yajurveda and also Atharva Veda, and as I mentioned, in scattered form in Samaveda. So, of course, following the commentary of Sayanacharya, because Sayanacharya's commentary is the most authentic commentary on the Vedas. He wrote commentaries on all the 4 Vedas. So, it is a huge Herculean task. So, I am trying to give in prose order Sayana's commentary. Often the language is slightly altered to make it more straightforward, because in Sanskrit sentences frequently, it may not be, it not just, the noun, verb, and then adjective, it doesn't follow in that order. So I'm trying to give it a prose order as far as possible. So the Suktam is the original text, mostly from Rigveda Samhita's version, plus Sayanacharya's commentary in Sanskrit, and a description as far as possible, a freelance description, but closely following Sayana's commentary. This is the effort that's being made, and you are most welcome to give your opinions on this. And of course, in many places, it is important to give you an idea of some of the fundamental principles of Vedic hermeneutics, because there is a reason, there is a method, it's been long established by the great Vedic sages, especially the great teachers of Vedic tradition, those who wrote important books on Vedic hermeneutics. They give some guidelines and fundamental principles which are supposed to be followed, which are supposed to be the authentic ways of interpreting the Vedic mantras. So I am trying to give an outline of the fundamental vital principles of Vedic hermeneutics. If you listen to the previous 2 sessions, you find some of the, especially the 6 different principles of Vedic hermeneutics in general, especially some of the principles employed in interpreting the Rigveda mantras. Because in Rigveda, as I mentioned, is a very irregular language. It doesn't follow a particular grammatical structure, strictly speaking. And again, Vedic language is much older than the modern Sanskrit. Modern in the sense, the Sanskrit, which was actually established as a definite grammatical structure 900 years before Christ was born. So when you talk about modern Sanskrit, you're talking about a Sanskrit whose grammatical structure and principles of interpretation were laid down by Panini 900 years before Christ was born. So that is the modernity of modern Sanskrit. So thank you. Now we come to subject. Another very important thing for you to remember, Those of you, some of you may be following the scholarly tradition of Indian scholarly tradition. So if you look at the Bhagavata Purana, which is the most important devotional classic in Hindu Vedantic tradition, if you go to Dvitiya Skandha, it may be called a book. There are 12 books, not bound book section in that sense. 12 books in the Bhagavata Purana, which has got more than 18,000 verses. And in that book, in the second chapter, the transition from the fifth chapter to sixth chapter. So second skandha, they call it Dvitiya Skandha, second skandha, the second book. The transition from fifth chapter to the sixth chapter, you find the ideas of Purusha Sukta completely. In fact, the commentator of Bhagavata Purana, Siddharacharya, says towards the end of the fifth chapter, chapter number 5 of the second skandha, Dvitiya Skandha of Bhagavata Purana, Siddharacharya says you can understand this section only if you know Purusha Suktam. So this should be understood in the light of Purusha Suktam. Sa eva Purushas tasmad andam nirbhidya nirgataha sahasra uru ankri sahasranana shishavan. So he says, for example, this Purusha, it is endowed with, that Purusha is endowed with 1,000 eyes, 1,000 middle portions, 1,000 heads, and so on. 1,000 here means infinite, all-pervading, the all-pervading nature, the omnipresent nature of the cosmic reality, which is the physical form of the all-pervading divine spirit, which is actually impersonal, attributeless, non-empirical, transcendental. But if we can have a physical aspect, it is this Purusha. So he says, Sakasra Sisha idi ardharchasya brahmanosya mukhamasid. Brahmanosya mukhamasid is a mantra from Purusha Suktam, which is a description of the creation of humanity and the division of the entire humanity into different categories based on the characteristics, not birth, but characteristics. So you can find Purusha Sukta is the first, gives the first reference to the four human temperaments, exemplified Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, not caste, but rather four types of human temperaments. Those who are highly evolved in spiritual life, who are of a contemplative nature, who are mostly philosophers, contemplatives, those who spend their time in meditation, in teaching, who are always immersed in higher spiritual ideas, they call Brahmanas. Then Kshatriyas, who are active, dynamic, who are involved in a lot of physical activities, which later came to be known as the warrior class. Then those who are involved in different trades and business activities, Vaishya, and then Shudra, those who are not endowed with much spiritual temperament, those who are more of a active nature, but not giving much importance to intellectual pursuits or even business, those who are mostly involved in doing some kind of service activities. So you can find this Purusha Sukta. It is so comprehensive. At the beginning, it describes the absolute reality as a cosmic person, as a transcendental dimension. Purusha evedam sarvam, yat kinja jagat, all you can find it. Idam sarvam Purusha eva. All that you find in this universe is only that Purusha only. And then it gives a very wonderful allegorical description of creation. Creation itself is a yajna. It is a sacred ritual. The creation is equated to a great Vedic sacrifice. Not sacrificing, not like you find in the Abrahamic tradition, Abraham was willing to sacrifice his own son. Finally, he ended up sacrificing a goat or something like that. Not that kind of sacrifice, but rather sacrifice through contemplation, sacrificing oneself, one's own comforts, one's own existence for creating this universe. That means the cosmic person, the divine reality, manifests himself as this empirical, all-pervading, tangible universe. So it's called yajna. Yajnana yajnam ajanta deva. You find he can later. We will discuss that maybe after one or two more sessions. So first, the description of the absolute reality, all-pervading, transcendental and immanent. It is Paramatma Sarupa Eva. Sayanacharya says is only the all-pervading Brahman or Atman, Paramatma. Then the description of creation as a yajna, and then how from this all-pervading cosmic person, people of different temperaments, those who are of a contemplative nature, spiritually endowed, and those who are more of an active nature, those who are involved in different activities, how people of different temperaments came into existence, how they were born from all this. So you can find a very beautiful allegorical conception. So Sayanacharya says, Sakasrashisha idi ardharchasya brahmanosya mukhamasi ityadescha riktrayasya arthaka purvadhyaya eva darshitaka. So Sayanacharya is trying to explain the connection between the 5th chapter and the 6th chapter, 5th and 6th chapters of the second skandha called Ditiya Skandha, or second book of Bhagavata Purana. So you can find, if you read that, you may get a monotheistic interpretation of Purusha Sukta you will get. Now we will come to the Suktam proper. So, as we already finished the first mantra, Sahasra Sesha Purusha, Sahasraksha Sahasrapat, Sabhumim Vishwado Vrittva Atyadishthat Dashangulam. This is what we discussed. Of course, you find here, for example, Shukla Yajurveda gives Sabhumim Vishwata Sprutva. You find. So, Vishwado Vrittva, in the Rigvedic version, Vishwada Sprutva means having touched, having pervaded, having enveloped, all these meanings can be there. So this is the first mantra, already finished. If you are going to doubt, you are most welcome to ask during interaction. Then we also discussed the second mantra. Purusha evedam sarvam yad bhudam yaccha bhavyam. Idam sarvam Purusha eva. Whatever you see around you, with your eyes you see, with eyes and mind together cooperate when you see something and you come to know different visual objects. So also when the mind and ears come together, you come to know many things by hearing. So also all the other senses of perception, the sense of touch, sense of smell, sense of taste, all these cooperate with mind and you perceive, you comprehend different things. Okay, all these Purusha only. So, Purusha Sukta will eventually tell you, out of 1/4 of this cosmic reality, this visible empirical phenomenal world exists, or it manifests, the 1/4 of the cosmic person manifests as the visible, this tangible empirical universe, which is subject to changes, where all living beings go through these cycles of birth, life, death, rebirth. In this way, the entire cosmos, the whole universe, in a cyclic order, goes through this wheel of coming to existence, existing. An insect may exist for a few minutes. A human being maybe for 100 years. The universe may be a few billions of years. But again, they get dissolved in its original cause and also re-emerge. It is called sarga. Sarga is not creation, sarga is projection. So, this Purusha, out of this Purusha, 1/4 projects as this visible universe, and this visible universe, including all human beings or living beings, go through this wheel of the rotating wheel, the cycle of birth, death, rebirth, and again this rotating wheel. So it goes on like that. So this is the structure that we are going to discuss today. So Purusha evedam sarvam yad bhudam yaccha bhavyam. Whatever belongs to the past, whatever belongs to the present, and whatever belongs to the future, all Purusha eva, this cosmic person. So if you use the word C and P capital, cosmic person, that is Purusha. What is the Purusha? Purusha is only the entire cosmos, whatever you experience. And also that part of the reality which is beyond your empirical experience. What is within the sphere of your empirical experience is 1/4. It's an allegorical metaphor. Again, it's a great poem and also a great spiritual realization. It's a great spiritual realization and also a great poem. Actually, every great poem has got some kind of a spiritual realization behind it. If the poem is worth reading, I used to repeat again and again. Suppose you go to the market and buy a huge bundle of paper and a lot of wonderful pens, and you are very healthy and strong, and decide, I am going to write poetry for the next 1 week. You work very hard, you are very muscular, very strong, you go and write. It's a carpenter making, no offense, please carpenters, a chair or a table you may polish and make a wonderful table or chair, but you cannot write a great poetry like that. It should come to you unasked, uninvited. The poetry should catch you by the throat and make you write. That's why a great poet is born and a great poem is born. So, that's why it's a poetry. This Purusha Suktam is a grand example of the sublime form of poetry. The whole cosmic existence, the mystery of creation, and the mystery of the highest transcendental reality are described in the language of a mystic poem. So, Purusha evedam sarvam yaccha bhudam yaccha bhavyam. Whatever belongs to the past and whatever belongs to the future and whatever is there before you, Purusha eva, all is the cosmic person only. And udamrudattasya ishanaka yat annena tirokati. So coming to the bhashya, yat sarvam vartamanam jagat sarvam Purusha eva sarvam paramatma rupa eva. This is Sayana. Sayana was a great follower of Shankaracharya. So there is a great danger in listening to freelance interpretation of a great mystical poem. The danger is, unless that person should have a realization through meditation, spiritual practices, the great sages, like you can find Shankaracharya, Sri Ramakrishna, all these great saints and great spiritual teachers, they had the realization. Or you should have studied from a great teacher. If you have one of these possibilities, you can listen to the person. Either he is a realized person or he is a person who has studied from a teacher, who has studied from a teacher, who again must be studied from his teacher. Otherwise, a freelance interpretation can be terribly dangerous. It's not only wrong, but it's actually very, very, very dangerous. So Sayana is the most authentic commentator. Let us listen to him, and after listening to him, let us use our own free will to interpreting whatever we want. So Sayanacharya says, Sarvam Purusheva Paramatma Rupa Eva. It is Atman, Paramatman, Brahman. That's what he says. Yad Bhudam Yacha Bhavyam Atidam Jagat Bhavishyat Jagat Cha Purusheva. It is very simple. Whatever belongs to the past, whatever belongs to the future is only Purusha. By implication, it also means called Upalakshana Nyaya. By implication, it means whatever belongs to the present also is Purusha. Again, Uta Amrutasya Ishanaha. And not only that, that Purusha is the master of Amrutatvam, of immortality. Once you realize your own identity with that Purusha, not the Purusha of Sankhya philosophy, but Purusha of Purusha Suktam, is Paramatma Rupa, means the all-pervading divine spark, Brahman. Once you realize this identity, your own identity with Brahman, then what happens? You also become immortal. So, apicha amaranattvasya, amaranam means deathlessness, state amaranatvam means deathlessness. So, once you realize, you also attain your own deathlessness. Yad annena tirokadi, yasmat karanat praninam bhojena annena nimitta bhudena sukiyang Karanavastham adhikramya paridrushyamanam jagadavastham prapnodi. So what it means is, once you realize this, you identify your own true nature with your own true nature. And not only that, same Brahman also manifests as the cause of this transmigratory cycle, which is regulated by the principles of the only word that in Sanskrit, karma phalam, means the results of a karma. So according to Vedanta, according to even Sankhya, Yoga, Buddhism, you find whatever we do, whatever we experience, that becomes part of our personality. And we carry the subtle residual effects and results of our actions and experiences. And it becomes a samskara, a vritti, a samskara, a vasana, a sankalpa. And accordingly, we do things in future. Our actions are influenced by the results of our own previous actions. And this eventually is spread out through the entire life, not only one life, the cycles of birth, life, actions, death and rebirth. And who is the regulating principle of this cycle based on karma phala? That is also Purusha. That's the meaning here. Now third mantra, Etavan asya mahima Ado jayascha purushakam padosi vishwabhudani tribadasya amrutam divi. Now the prosoder is Atida anagada vartamana rupam jagadya asti. So what it means etavan. Of course, the same word in Samaveda becomes tavanasya. So you can find an example of different versions. Etavan asya. Okay, now this visible universe, whatever you experience, this is the mahima, the manifestation, the glory of Purusha. So the entire universe, life, all that you find around is now considered to be the manifestation of the glory of Purusha. Now, the one important principle to understand, So you can find here the Purusha is interpreted in so many different ways. The same Purusha is called the Paramatma Surupa Eva, as Rasayanacharya says. The same Purusha is also called the regulating principle behind these cosmic cycles of birth, life, death and rebirth. And the same Purusha, the Purusha manifests himself as so many things in this universe. The entire universe is a tribute to that Purusha, a glory of that Purusha, a manifestation of that Purusha. So here we have to remember, this is in the Vedic hermeneutical classics, Vedic scholars, interpreters, again and again make one important point. This is not the name of an event or an entity or an object. This is actually a spiritual, a mystical experience. And they say it is not something that we pursue using our own tools of perception. So the famous statement that Shankaracharya makes in this context is Pratyakshadi pramana anulabdhena hi vishaye sudehi pramanam na. So Pratyakshadi pramana anulabdhe na means hi vishaye sude pramanam, or you can put it other way, Pratyakshadi pramana anulabdhehi vishaye sudehi pramanam na. There is actually a response in one context of the Shankaracharya's commentary. But it means is, whatever you pursue using your tools of perception, for example, eyes, ears, sense of touch, sense of smell, sense of taste. These are the 5 senses of perception, and mind. Whatever you pursue through these pramanas, the tools of epistemology, tools of theory of knowledge, for that you don't have to turn to a book, scripture, Vedas or anything. What cannot be perceived empirically using your eyes or ears, whatever you cannot perceive at the sensory level, to understand that only you turn to these great mystical books called Srutis or Vedas or Upanishads. It's a fundamental principle, remember. So when we read this great poetical classic, Purusha Suktam, we should remember this is a realization of great sages in their own meditative experiences. This is an important thing to remember. Of course, Sayanacharya, the commentator of Vedas, he also makes it very clear. The same point he makes. These are important principles we have to keep in mind when we read these books. In fact, it's interestingly, those who have read this Raymond Topanikir's work, his Veda Manjari, called Vedic Experience, the great work, as I mentioned, it's not exactly a translation. It is an attempt to catch the spirit of the Vedas through Western poetical, little poetical methods, So you find him translating many of the mantras into his own poetical form in modern English. He was, of course, a teacher. He was a professor in Southern California, perhaps, I think so. So you find Vedic Experience. So he also writes them. He also, in his introduction or elsewhere, he makes a point. He doesn't refer to Sayana, but what I'm going to tell you right now, quoting Sayana, he also says, in Vedas, you are not getting a statement of a fact that you can verify using your own tools of epistemology, your own tools of knowledge. It is an experience, mystical, transcendental experience of the great sages that you are finding when you read the Vedas. So you can find an attempt to catch the spirit of these great sages. So Sayanacharya says, Pratyakshena anumityava yastu upayo na buddhyade enam vidanti vedena tasmat vedasya vedada. Into any Vedic conference, any Vedic discussion worth the name, you can find all scholars quote this again and again. That is, Pratyakshena anumityava yastu upayo na buddhyade. So whatever you cannot perceive or understand using your tools of direct perception or inference, or other pramanas, other tools of knowledge, whatever you cannot perceive or comprehend, whatever you can never pursue a compliment, using your own tools, the well-known tools of epistemology, either direct perception or inference. Pratyekshena animityava yastu upayo na buddhyate. If you cannot realize this or understand this using these tools, yenam vidanti vedena. That is what Vedas are trying to teach you. Tasmat vedasya vedita. In fact, this is the central theme and this is the significance of Vedas. The Vedas are trying to capture the mystical truth in the language of poetry. So, anyway, that's the only reason why I referred to, I recommended when somebody asked me the question, instead of reading a prose translation of Vedic mantras, you better read Raymond Panikya, because he is trying to capture the spirit of the Vedas and he's doing it, playing the role of a poet himself. He himself you can find a lot of mysticism when he tries to put in modern English verse the great spiritual ideas that he found in the Vedas. That's why it comes closer to the real experience you find in the Vedas than many of the prose translations, which can frequently be very misleading. Otherwise, 1,000-headed cosmic man is sitting in the sky. It would be absolutely misleading. But read Raymond Panikya, you can get a little bit of that, the feeling of the great sages. So, okay, that's why I refer to Mantra Manchari or Vedic experience of Raymond Panikya. So, Edavanasya Mahima. As I mentioned, Samaveda has got Tavanasya Mahima. Etavanasya Mahima. Like this goes, Adojyayagimscha Purushaha Padosya Vishwa Bhutani Tribadasya Murdam Divi. This is the popular way of chanting that you find in the Beria, etc. So what it means is, Etavan and all this Asya Mahima, Purushasya Mahima, that's Sayana. Sayana says all Purusha. It is a manifestation. You may find a translation glory, but glory, of course, true, but it's a manifestation in so many different mysterious ways. So this cosmic reality, it manifests in the form of this empirical universe and also in the form of the transcendental reality. Tribadu, the Uday Purushaga, in the coming next verse you find. So when you see a mighty river, big ocean, a high mountain, or great picture, that also a human being who is trying to, that ability to write a great book, to sing a beautiful song, write great poetry, or also the mountains and oceans. All these are nothing but the manifestation of the divine spark. As I mentioned earlier, when the human skills reach a higher level where it crosses the boundary of the empirical, there is a boundary between the empirical and the transcendental. So if a poet or an artist, a novelist, or even a scientist, sometimes you find Oppenheimer remembering the verse from the Gita when this explosion took place, you can see. So the spirit of Gita is catching him. That's why he remembered that. Otherwise, any scientist would have remembered maybe some formula or something. But his mind beyond that. So in all this, you can find the manifestation of Purusha. That's why Sayanacharya says, Etavan sarvopi asya mahima, Purushasya mahima, samarthya visheshaka, nadu tasya vastava surupam. Samarthya visheshaka means the splendor, the samarthya means the efficiency, let us say, kaushalam, the glory, the manifestation, the diversity of manifestation of the Purusha. Nadu tasya vastava surupam. It's not that. See, a great novelist writing a great novel, a great poem, or a great writing, a great painting, is certainly a manifestation of that Purusha. But the painting is not Purusha, that's what he says. So, natu tasya vastava surupam. You cannot say the painting is Atman. You cannot say great classical work is an Atman. So I mentioned, when the skill, when the human skill crosses the boundary that divides between the empirical and the transcendental and reaches the transcendental, there you find it's a manifestation of Atman. That's an important thing. So at the empirical level, it may be a good novel, but at the transcendental level, it may have a message. And that message may have something to do with spirituality. That's why when you write a really great book, you write a book, or maybe you read a great book, if it's true. You may find yourself the realities of your own life when you read Chekhov or Dostoevsky or Tolstoy. You can find your own friends, your own relatives, people whom you meet in the streets, sometimes living in the great poetical or maybe literary classics of these super geniuses in the field of writing or literature, you find. That's why when a great writer walks the street, he recruits the ordinary man walking the street, also becomes part of his literary imagination. He doesn't think and imagine, let me try to put it then that would, no, you won't consider such a book worth spending money and buying and reading. It will be terribly boring. But when the spirit of Atman takes the form of a literary genius, and if he walks in the streets, he will recruit characters from the streets, from the markets, from everywhere. And so they become alive when you read, and you are able to connect with them. So that's also these Purushas. So that's why Sarvopi Purushasya Mahima Samarthya Vishesha means a kind of a manifestation of the glory of Purusha, but should not be mistaken that it is Purusha itself. No. That's why Natu Tasya Vastava Surupam. It's not its original, it's not the full form, it's only a manifestation. Purushaha ata jyayancha. So mahimnobi adisayena adhikascha. So the Purusha has got another higher dimension, a dimension that goes beyond the empirical. And the poet will tell you that transcendental dimension is 3/4 and the empirical dimension only 1/4. Again, should not be taken mathematical in terms of mathematical accuracy. It is again a metaphor, is again a great allegory. Because actually a poet can use an allegory, but the reader can capture the spirit. What the poet must have felt in him, and that's where the poet's genius comes into play. So etavan asya mahima. So this universe, belonging to the past, present and future, is nothing but a manifestation of an aspect of glory of this Purusha. But in reality, Purusha is much higher. So, Purushaha ataha jyayan. Jyayan, the pronunciation in chanting style may be different. Jaya, gumscha you find. So, the Purusha himself is ataha jyayan, is far higher, far superior, far much more. Vishwa bhudani asya padaka. So whatever you see in the empirical universe, including the human beings, and all the human skills, empirical skills, including all these, whatever you find in the coming mantra, the poet says, Sashanana Sane Abhi. So you find here, things that eat and things that do not eat. human beings, living beings, and also, those who are endowed with the mind and senses and so on, and also the trees and mountains and valleys, that is achetana, that is anashana, things that don't eat. That's again poetical language. Those things which eat animals, human beings, and so on, and those things that do not eat, the mountains and valleys. All these are different manifestations of that cosmic person, that Atman, at the empirical level, which is allegorically said to be 1/4. The 3/4, that is Tripad Urda Uday Purusha, that will come to later, the fourth mantra. Tripad. So Tripad, that means 3/4, 3/4. Purusha Urdha means it is the transcendental, the higher, the celestial, the transcendental. We'll come to that later. This is only in the fourth mantra, because you find that some of the ideas mentioned in the third mantra become obvious and clear only when we go to the fourth mantra. So that's again a genius of a poem. If you see, a really great poem cannot be read piece by piece. It is an integrated single entity. It's like a human being. You cannot cut the hand of a man now and you cannot. It is an integrated single living human being. The living poem is classical poetry. An example of classical poetry has got a life in it. So you cannot read it in isolation. It's a single living entity. That's why you have to read the whole thing at one go, which is, of course, not humanly possible in this discussion. So Purusha evedam sarvam yad bhudam etcha bhavyam udamrdattu se ishanaha yad nena dirohi. I think I finished that. So edavanasya mahima ato jayagumscha purusha jayan cha. That means it's a sandhi combination, it's a junction, conjunction. So called jayam sa purusha. Padaha asya bhutani. Pada means 1/4. Asya padaha. So the Purusha's 1/4 is Vishwa Bhutani. All that you find in this, whatever has come into existence, not only living beings but anything else, everything. Bhutani means whatever has come into existence. The whole existence is nothing but 1/4 of that Purusha. And then, this is more important, Tribadasya Amurdam Divi. Asya Tribad Amurdam Divi. Sometimes in this prose order you have to add Tishtati, existing like that. So, of this Purusha, 3/4 is at the transcendental level, at the celestial level, higher level. Means it is beyond time, space and causation. It is the transcendental dimension. So the same transcendental dimension actually manifests at the empirical. So our own human personality can be called a micro dimension of this Purusha. So whatever you find in this universe is nothing but a micro dimension of that Purusha. That's why it is said that 3/4 of that Purusha is Amurdam. It is the eternal. It is the transcendental. Makato Mahiyan. So you find Anoraniyan, Makato Mahiyan, Atma Sijintoha Nihidam Gugayam, Tamakradu Pasyadishi, Vidashaka, Dhadu Prasadat, Mahimanam Atmanaha. So that Atman, a word used in Kathopanishad mantra, that is Purusha here. So that Purusha exists in all these empirical beings as Anohu, Aniyan, Makato Mahiyan, as the smallest of the small in the empirical level and the largest of the large, the transcendental level. That's why Vishtrabhyahamidam Krishnam Ekam Sena Sthido Jagad Gita, you find Mamai Vamsho Jiva Loge Jiva Bhuta Sanatanaka. You can only mantras you can find in the Gita. The idea is that absolute reality in its transcendental dimension constitutes 3/4, and the same absolute reality in its empirical dimension, in terms of empirical perception, or whatever you can see and experience at the empirical level, that is only 1/4. The transcendental dimension is 3/4. So that's the idea behind. Then Tribad Udait Purushaka. So the 3/4 dimension, the transcendental dimension, is higher. Utkarshena Tishtadi, that's the meaning of Udaitat. It exists as the transcendental, higher, more sublime dimension. Asya padaka iha punaha abhavat. The padosya iha abhavat. So padosya bhavat punaha tado vishvam vikramad sasanana shani abhi. This is mantras. Frequently we cannot do in the chanting form because we have to study the meaning of the words. So the idea is the 3/4 of this spiritual dimension is sublime, transcendental, and 1/4 the empirical. And then it says, whatever you find in this world, the human beings or animals or anything that eats, in the sense that's living, and also things like trees and mountains and valleys, which is anashana, it doesn't eat anything. All these belong to this empirical level. Vishang means Vishang Vikramad. It means it is spreading everywhere, comprehensively in all directions. So, in other words, what it means is this Purusha is existing as the macro and also the micro dimension of existence. So, in its Paramatma Rupa, in its transcendental Advaitic dimension, it is the transcendental reality. The same transcendental reality exists in the form of the empirical dimension. That the point is, this empirical dimension is subject to changes, this universe. So that's why in the Advaitic language it's called a mithya. Mithya means that which doesn't exist in the same form all the time without changes. That which does not exist as a meaning. That which does not exist without changes. It means it is subject to changes. It's moving all the time. It goes through the cycles of coming to existence, existing and getting dissolved, again reprojection, sarga, projection again. The same reality projects at the empirical, and the same reality also exists all the time as the transcendental. So now we can have interaction. You are most welcome with questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Very magnificent concepts and wonderful
Yeah,
explanation.
thank you.
Based on the cue of the raised hands on the Zoom call, Sri Ram has the first question.
Yeah, please, Sri Ram.
It has often been recommended to me to chant the Purusha every day.
Yeah, very good.
One thing I can see is that it is comprehensive in meaning. It's good Shravana to do 2 pages. You have a complete description of the entire universe. And then also later on we will see there are elements of Anusandhanam.
Yeah.
Veda Hametam Purusham Mahantam.
Yeah.
Can you just comment on that, Swamiji? And then
That we'll come to that. That comes to the end, Veda Hametam Purusham Mahantam Aditya Varnam Tamasa Parastar. That will come to that later. Okay.
I didn't see I didn't catch the meaning of Yadane.
We will discuss that later. We'll discuss that later. Because that comes, but we'll discuss that later. Okay? Because, Vedahamedam Purusham Mahantam Aditya Varnam Tamasa Parastad, that we'll discuss later, because actually that subject comes towards the end. As you proceed further, the same idea, all these come towards the end. After this, I think from 8th mantra onwards, we will start discussion on yajna. How, yat purushena kavisha deva yajnam atanvada vasanto asya dijajyam ikshata. So you can find a description of yajna, a description of the universe as a yajna, as a sacrifice, a sublime ritual. And also how different human beings, not only human beings, all living beings came into existence with different temperaments. That we can, we'll come to later. We can.
But do you recommend that when we chant the Purusha Suktam every day, we use it for?
I will. It is.
We use it as an aid for dhyana for meditation.
Yeah, it is used. It is. That's why it is. Sometimes some people chant it when doing bath, when they're taking bath in the morning, and it is used also abhisheka. It is an important mantra for doing abhisheka in certain mantras, especially in the Vaishnava traditions. It is used there. Oh, Purusha Sukta is so. It is so universal. It can be Shaiva dimension, the Vaishnava tradition also. Okay, we will discuss that later. Vedaka medam Purusham Mahantam Aditya Varnam Tamasa Parasta, etc. We will discuss that later. In fact, the very subject comes later.
I missed the meaning of Yadannena Tirokati.
Yeah, we will come to that. Oh, Yadannena Tirokati. Yeah. So, Akashad Vayu Rakni Atne Rabhaga Bhip Pridhivi Pridhivyam Oshedhega Oshedhivega Annam Annamaya Purusha.
What you
yeah, I'll come in that. Yet Annena Tirokati means, Anna means matter. So actually, the whole creation, the empirical universe, it expands, grows by food. So Annam can mean food, Annam can mean matter, Annam also can mean bhogyam. Whatever we experience, any experience can be called bhogyam. So, yet annena zero means the entire universe, the whole creation of the empirical world is expanding, existing by through the karma phala. Bhogyam means karma phala. So, you can see the whole humanity functions according to karma phala. Our actions, our behavior constitute our character. Our character again generates new actions, new experiences, and we go on sowing the seed, then harvesting, again sowing the seed, harvesting. In this way, this whole cosmic cycle of empirical existence continues like a wheel. So that is the meaning of bhogyam. The true meaning of anna here, philosophically speaking, it means bhogyam. Bhogyam means karma phalam. Karma phalam means, clear? Somebody?
What you're saying is this statement is saying that the universe is governed by the law of karma.
Yeah, that's true at the empirical level.
Cause and action, cause and effect.
Empirical level. But that empirical existence only empirical. It is subject to changes. The moment you realize that it is only empirical, at that moment you cross the boundary. See, I tell you, the moment we realize that this world is, it's only so much. When you realize that, you'll find that the realization comes at the same moment when you try to get a glimpse of the transcendental. Without getting a glimpse of the transcendental, you will not be able to realize the empirical nature of the empirical world. It's an important thing to remember. It's not one after another. It happens simultaneously. This even in our own life. When suppose you do something and you understand, well, it was a mistake. The realization that it was a mistake and you're crossing the boundary of that error, it happens simultaneously. It's an important thing. All the terrible villains of the world in history, if you look at it, they never thought they did anything wrong. They never thought they had anything to apologize for. That's why they remain villains throughout their life. Those who realize that they made a mistake they transcended that level. It's like that, the moment we understand that this annena tiroha, this world, empirical world, it actually, see, Purusha evedam sarvam yad bhudam yad chabhavyam udamurdatva ishanaha yad annena tirohati. Annena means, the real meaning is atirohati. See, look at Sayana. Yasmat karanat praninam bhojena annena nimitta bhudena Sokiyang karanavastham adhikramya paridrishyamanam jagadavastham prapnodi. What it means? In fact, this Purusha is the regulating principle, the guiding principle behind this play of people doing different things and they're enjoying or suffering their karma phalas. And again this cyclic life goes on rotating, and so that's the meaning. That Purusha is the regulating principle. That's why annena atirogadi means jagadavastham prapnodi. Because of these actions, people continue existing in this empirical world at the empirical level, because they are creating their own karma phalas, they are enjoying their own karma phalas, and this rotation continues all the time. That's the idea behind. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj. David, you're next.
David, most welcome. Yeah. David is not seeing, is not visible. No.
Hello, Swami.
Yeah, namaskar. Thank you. Yeah.
I have two parts to my question. The first one is very simple.
Yeah.
How do you spell the poet's name that you mentioned, who translated the English, and how do you spell Sayana?
Oh, Sayana. S-A-Y-A-N-A. Sayana. He was a great sage who wrote commentaries on the 4 Vedas.
Okay, and then you mentioned also the poet who translated into English that you referred to.
Oh yeah, actually, long back, I think on the very first day, somebody requested me for some reference book. So I did not give a verbal translation of Rigveda Samhita, because if you read the word-to-word translation, you'll be terribly disappointed. But on the other hand, one great writer, and his name was, I think he was a professor in the University of Southern California somewhere. He had studied Sanskrit. Most probably he was a partly of Indian lineage, so he must have. I heard he studied Vedas from some traditional teachers. He went to Kerala. He was from Kerala. His father was a Spanish gentleman, Raimondo Paniker. Paniker is a title that belongs. So that's what I heard from a Jesuit Christian priest in India, who is himself a scholar. So he has written a book called Vedic Experience. That's the name of the book. And in that book you find, it is not remember, it's a very, compared to the size of the Rigveda Samhita, it's a very, very small book. But as an English book, it's a very big book, because Vedas are so huge, So there he has selected some Vedic suktas, mantras, and he has poetically translated into English free verse, I think.
How do you spell his name?
Raimondo Paniker. Maybe Bobby can give him reference. Bobby, have you seen that?
We can't hear you.
I will email that to you.
Yeah, Bobby
Okay,
can
thank
email
you.
to you. Bobby can email to you. So
Okay, thank you, sir.
he himself wrote in English verse. Sometimes you find a good poet who has a poetical sense and who is inspired by writing this. He can capture a little bit of the mystical dimension of the great Vedic poets in a way that a word-to-word translator can never do. That's the problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I had the other part of the question was, can it be assumed that So Shankaracharya, obviously he wrote books and commentaries, and he was a lumen soul. Can it be assumed that Sayana and Vyasa are illumined souls, and as commentators, and what they say can be used as a manual, kind of like we use Swami Yatishwarananda's meditation and spiritual life?
Yeah, I think, about Sayana, there's no doubt that he was certainly an outstanding scholar and a great authority on the Vedic literature, Vedic philosophy. But about he must have, of course, he was certainly a highly respected sage and saint. But Vyasa and Shankara, Vyasa, of course, we don't know much about the history, but he was certainly, obviously, he must be highly accomplished element. So, Shankaracharya, of course, without any doubt, he was, in fact, he stands at the very junction of Indian philosophy. You are one of the greatest saints and philosophers of all times that we can even imagine. We can read as what Sister Nivedita wrote about Shankaracharya. This is a greatness that we can only appreciate from a distance but can never understand. This is how Sister Nivedita concludes her attempt in her own words to understand, to write something for Shankaracharya's work. So you can Sister Nivedita has written a very moving paragraph. I can perhaps next session I can tell you where she writes that magnificent estimate of Shankaracharya's works. Margaret Noble, Swami Vivekananda's great Western disciple, Sister Nivedita. She has written some magnificent paragraphs. 2 or 3 greatest estimates of Shankaracharya, attempt to understand Shankaracharya's contribution. Sister Nivedita, K.M. Munshi, and Dr. Radhakrishnan in his Indian philosophy, I think comes in the 2nd volume of Indian philosophy, where he writes about Shankara. So these are some of the great, marvelous writers. And Sister Nivedita, if you read, you can't help being moved, because she, you have to understand, she was not a great Sanskrit scholar or anything, but she was a great disciple of Swami Vivekananda. So she had developed a spiritual mechanism within her mind that could appreciate and capture the greatness of India's spiritual heritage. In a way that, unfortunately, many Indians even are not able to understand.
You have time to do and review.
Excuse me?
You can see and then review.
Review? Oh, yeah.
I can't explain the stray audio, but I can give you the spelling of Raimundo Panikar's name. It is Raimundo, and the last name is Panikar, Panikkar, Panikkar.
Could you spell the first name again?
Raimundo, Raimundo.
Okay. He's that Vedic translator?
Yes, the book title is Vedic Experience. The Vedic Experience, yes.
I see, okay.
And it's in the chat now also.
Okay.
Raimundo Panikkar. Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank you.
See that on Amazon Books, Google Books, etc., all over the web.
Yeah.
Maharaj, I don't see any more hands, nor are there any questions on the YouTube.
Most welcome. Yeah. So anyway, thank you for the great questions. Yeah.
So Swami, I did have can you use those writings as, like Shankara, one can use his writings as a manual? These other writers, are they just more interesting, or can they be used
I won't dare to equate Raimundo Panikkar or anyone with Shankaracharya. I can't even imagine, can't even think of it. Because Shankaracharya is an outstanding spiritual teacher, And so Raimundo Panikkar comes very close to doing justice to the Vedic mantras through his skill in writing English poetry. So please don't equate Raimundo Panikkar. As Raimundo Panikkar will never forgive you if you compare him to with Shankaracharya, because he was such a humble person. So he will never forgive you if you do such a terrible thing, because just like comparing you with Jesus Christ, you must be a very wonderful Christian, but I can't compare you are Jesus Christ. I can't do that. You may write a wonderful article on the teachings of Jesus, but I will compare you with okay. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks again, Sanjay, for putting the link to Amazon up there.
Yeah.
And we will try to be humble in our receipt of Sri Panikar's poetical gifts.
Yeah, the reason why I recommended the book is because it is better for English reading public to get a taste of the magnificence of Vedic poetry by reading somebody who could write poetry, trying to put in the ideas he got from Vedas, rather than reading a prose translation, which may or may not, which more likely won't do justice to the poetical aspect of Vedic poetry. That's the reason. Okay.
Yeah. In that light, I'm looking forward to reading it myself. Shay Seelig, I apologize that your hand came up after I spoke too soon. So
most well. Yeah.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you.
So you were speaking about how the Purusha Suktam and other Vedic Sukta, they are like poetic descriptions of the experiences of the rishis.
Yeah.
And that's a very different concept than some who say that the Vedas are the literal word of God, or that any religious book is the literal word of God.
Yeah.
To me, it's quite a radical concept that it actually, it's quite a radical difference between the two. Could you speak about that a bit?
Yeah. Vedas are called the word of God, not in the sense in which certain religious scriptures are called as coming from God, revealed directly word by word, comma by comma, not in that sense. In fact, the most sublime part of Vedic literature called the Upanishads. The Upanishads constitute the philosophical, the spiritual peaks of Vedic literature. And Shankaracharya, who wrote commentary, the most authentic commentaries, the first commentary on Upanishads, he says even the Upanishads themselves are secondary. The experience of what the Upanishads teach is the primary source of spiritual enlightenment. So this is the view. In fact, in our own tradition, in the Mundaka Upanishad, if you take the beginning of Mundaka Upanishad mantras, you find a well-known local person goes to a great sage and he asks the question, please teach me. And in answer to this, the sage tells him, there are two types of knowledge, the primary and the secondary. The secondary knowledge includes all the Vedas, all the books, the Bibles, everything. The primary knowledge is the experience that you should reach, you should obtain by practicing the spiritual disciplines mentioned in those books. So, Devi Devedi Devi, Tatra Paracha Paracha. Two types of knowledge. One is the supreme, that is spiritual experience. Then the secondary, the Vedas, and all the names are mentioned, Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharvaveda, Purana, all possible branches of learning are mentioned. To include, they are included in the category of secondary knowledge. But then you can say, if you find an Upanishad, actually the Upanishads are far superior to Rig Veda Samhita, no doubt about it. Upanishad is the essence of the philosophical, spiritual essence of the Vedic literature. Now, Upanishads are given so much of importance as a metaphor, it said, coming from God, only in a secondary sense. in the higher level, even Upanishads constitute only a means to reach a higher level of spiritual experience, which is discussed in the Upanishads. So the experience discussed in the Upanishads is superior to the Upanishads themselves. It's an important. That's one important area difference between the Abrahamic, I would say, the Vedantic and non-Vedantic traditions. Vedantic tradition never will tell you that every word or comma or full stop of a particular book is directly coming from a monotheistic God. No. Shankaracharya says you should go beyond all this. When you reach that experience, all the Vedas become non-Veda. Tatra Veda, Veda Bhavanti. You can find it, Brihadaranyaka Chandogya, find. When you reach that spiritual, mystical experience, the Vedas become non-Vedas. Means you transcend the Vedas. Now remember, but those who transcended the Vedas, they are writing commentaries on the Vedas. And that's why they are so authentic. That's why I mentioned, Shankaracharya's books are authentic. You cannot. David asked me whether Raimundo Panigar book is as authentic as Shankaracharya. I can never even think of saying that. But Raimundo Panigar's skill in writing, he's inspired by reading the Vedas. So that's why I think nobody has written anything comparable to what he wrote. There are only what he wrote in Vedic experience. There are not too many, only a few suktas he has taken, a few mantras from Vedas he has taken, and he has given descriptions in prose and also in the form of poetry. I read this book long ago, 20 years ago, not recently. So, but then whenever a Western reader who is interested so much in the Vedic literature, I cannot recommend a better book that will capture you, because there's a life of poetry in his writings. The beauty, the charm of poetry. Any student of literature cannot but enjoy the captivating charm of his work. It's not the whole poetry. A lot of prose also is there. But maybe Bobby must have read something. You're a poet yourself.
I'll say that if the book is out of print and some of us want to chip in, we'll get it together and we'll pore over it, because it may be a little hard to find, but we'll definitely get our hands on it.
We had copies in our bookshop. You can try again. Once more you can try. We had, once upon a time, I've seen those copies in our own bookstore. You can make an attempt, yeah. I don't know if they are still there or not. I don't know. I found long ago some copies. I think I got a copy, maybe it was the last copy I had, I gave it to Richard, Lima retreat.
Okay, we'll track it down.
I presented him a copy, yeah. Richard Schimpf. You can ask him. Yeah, okay.
I will.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
I was not unmoved. I can tell you that your references to the poetical voice and how it works in its authentic way did not land gently on my ears.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you for.
There were no further questions. Oh wait. Sriram's hand is still
Sriram,
up.
come on, Sriram. Yeah.
Just a small clarification. The direct experience is called aparokshanubhuti.
Yeah, direct experience, aparokshanubhuti. It's brahmanubhuti, atmanubhuti. All these are called direct experience. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, there is another question. I think this is more of a format question.
Yeah.
From YouTube. Are these lectures saved in a podcast form or other online service to retrieve them at later time? Yes, they are available on podcast. They are also retrievable from the website sfvedanta.org, and you can go to podcast there. It's /podcast.
In fact, I don't know if these lectures are available in podcast.
Yes,
other lectures are available in podcast. I don't know if they are giving this. Are they? We can do that.
Yes, sir. It's available.
They're available in podcast?
Yes, it's available.
Okay.
Yes,
otherwise, I'm going to ask one of you to do that, because I'm not myself an expert in this.
They're available in all those formats.
Podcast also? Okay.
Yes, Swami.
That's good news. Anyway. Okay. So thank you, every one of you. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Ram Maharaj.
Namaskar. Saugata is there? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going back home, Maharaj.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the great work you are doing for us.